people, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more complaining. People, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more. No.
All right, today we're going to talk about the complaining economy. I read a book several years ago that was really impactful and helped me understand even more about complaining. And in this book, and I've actually gone back, I remember the book and I remember the study and I remember the stats because I wrote them all down. But it's one of those things that you know it's in this book, but you can't go back and actually find it. So what it may be is it's in another book because I've read like 13, 14 books on complaining. The study is that 1,400 people were studied across various industries in the United States, and they were asked to track how much time they spent at work complaining to other people, complaining about anything or whatever, just getting together, hanging out, and complaining about the boss, complaining about the weather, complaining about the business, complaining about the local sports team, complaining about their lives, their kids, whatever, complaining. And they literally were able to get 1,400 people to document their time. And they discovered some really interesting statistics. What they found is, number one, 78%, that's more than 3/4 of people at work, waste on average 4.5 hours per week sitting around listening to and complaining to other coworkers. 4.5 hours a week. And when I got that stat, I was like, holy cow, that's more than 10% of a person's week. And so if you extrapolate that out, you begin to realize that that means that 1 out of every 11 people, or 1 out of every 9 people actually, is unnecessary at work if we could just get people to stop sitting around and complaining. Now, I'm not here to complain about complaining. As I've told you, there are reasons people complain and there are reasons people sit around at work and complain. And when we get into the 5 reasons people complain, you'll understand. People are not doing it because people are bad. We always want to assume that people are good and people are always just trying to get their needs met. That's it. And complaining is part of that. And if you think about the idea that the average person wastes 4.5 hours a week listening to other people complain, I actually ran the math on this. If you take the average US pay rate and you take 78%, 4.5 hours a week, et cetera, a company with 100 employees is losing $500,000 a year in production just from people sitting around complaining. They're losing $500,000 a year in productivity. That's the word I was looking for. Just from people sitting around and complaining to one another. That's a company with 100 employees. So there's a real cost to having a complaining culture at work. The stat, though, that really blew my mind, the thing that let me know that there is a real negative impact from complaining at work. And by the way, this is why we have our complaint-free business program. If you have a small business or know somebody who does, check out our complaint-free business program. But the stat that blew my mind was that, I've got to remember it, is that 1 out of every 10 people who quit their jobs quit because of complaining coworkers. Complaining coworkers. Now, 1 out of every 10%, that doesn't seem, 1 out of every 10, that doesn't seem like a lot. The problem is that people who are complaining, who are leaving their jobs because of complaining coworkers, are your best people. your best people. There's a UPS store right down the street here in Key Largo, and I love going in there because everybody there is always happy and upbeat, even at Christmas when they got piles and piles of stuff that had yet to be boxed and sent out. They're always so nice and friendly and positive and upbeat. That's what drives a business and makes it popular. And if 1 out of every 10 people who are leaving their job are leaving because of complaining coworkers, those are your best people. These are your happiest, most upbeat people. Whereas the people who are staying in the job are looking around and going, this is home. This is awesome. And that's why complaining is a cancer when it takes over a business. When rampant complaining, and by the way, that usually comes down from the top. It usually comes down from the top. People always say they want to raise morale. Well, the great Earl Nightingale said it, and I think it was originally Napoleon Hill who said it. You don't raise morale. Morale filters down from the top. So when you've got a culture of complaining, it spreads and permeates. And it's really, really costing your company money. And the last stat I'll share with you is that a study in England found that a person offered a promotion with a 10% pay raise. They asked people to consider, would you take a 10% pay raise and a promotion, but it was one of those but things. You have to work alongside a chronic complainer. And the people turned it down. They would rather not have to be with a chronic complainer. So complaining has real costs in our economy, and yet I was thinking this morning, complaining is what drives our economy in many ways. We've talked about before my background in advertising, and that there's only 2 motivators for human beings: fear and desire, or guilt and greed. And fear is spread through complaining. Have you ever thought about this? Are your armpits fresh enough? Whatever it is the media, the advertising agencies, the advertising industry basically complains to make us feel afraid. It expresses grief and pain. And it causes us to drive the economy. So it's interesting. On the one hand, complaining in some ways drives the economy. And in many ways, it really, really hurts and detracts from the economy. The one stat that I don't think you can measure, maybe you can, but it was the one that I kept hoping that they would measure, and I don't know necessarily there's a way to do it, and that is the really big impact of complaining on business or economy. And that is just the rampant negativity. If you've got rampant negativity, you've got finger pointing, you've got excuse making, you don't have a lot of creative thinking. My little moniker and my email signature says, no one ever complained their way to health, happiness, and success. And so what is yet to be monitored, but what I think is actually the huge biggest impact, is the negative effect of complaining just on the morale of people around the business. We all know, and maybe we've been at businesses where everybody just gets together, corners off and bitches. They go to the break room and they bitch. They go hide in the cubicle, the stairwell, outside while they're having a cigarette, whatever they do. They get together, they go to lunch and they complain. And the company just cannot seem to figure out why it's not thriving. They bring in all these consultants. And speaking of which, when I work with companies about helping them become complaint-free, I help them understand that complaint-free is not about telling people to shut up with all the complaining. It's exactly the opposite. It's providing people with such obvious communication pathways that are comfortable, that make them feel comfortable, that they don't feel the need to complain. Human beings are funny things. We won't get into it, but dueling was actually a very big thing for many, many years. And the thing that stopped dueling was not laws against dueling. It was younger gentlemen laughing at the stupidity of older gentlemen threatening to duel it out. Now, how did I get off on the dueling from the economy? Anyway, complaining, it'll come back to me. This is what happens when you do these live. The complaining economy it drives the economy. And the way that the way we get rid of complaining in an organization is if you repress people's ability to communicate, then they're going to complain. And they're going to tell people that you don't listen, the business doesn't care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, if you create forums and if you create opportunities and even a suggestion box, if you create ways for people to express themselves within an organization, then when somebody else comes up to them and starts complaining about something, they say, well, why don't you go right over there and fill out a suggestion, put it in the suggestion box, or type this to HR, or text suggestion to whatever the company comes up with. You've got to come up with so many opportunities, and you have to listen, and you have to take them seriously. If you just want people to shut up and stop complaining, you're never going to do that. You're never going to do that. You have to give them more ways to communicate such that complaining dies of its own accord. Now, should you also make your offices complaint-free zones? Yes, we have a little poster that comes with our complaint-free business program. It says this is a complaint-free zone. A lot of people have done that. The people who have done it successfully have done, this is a complaint-free zone, and the people who are not successful say, this is a complaint-free zone. Don't complain to me. Okay, I need to communicate with you. There are things I need to share with you. How would you suggest I share them? Give me an opportunity and a medium through which to share them. And that's when businesses see complaining begin to lessen. Do you own a business? Do you know somebody who does? Well, if so, click share right now so that they can learn the impact of complaining and also understand the importance of becoming a complaint-free person. Our complaint-free challenge is, of course, 21 days without complaining. You put the bracelet on your wrist. It has now been 3 days since I switched my bracelet, which means I am on day 3. It's just that simple. Click share and let us know that you did share, and that way we can say thank you, thank you, thank you very much. All right, let's see. I'm going to go back and, hey, this is my buddy John Smith. Good morning, guys and gals. I would love to see John. John is a guy that plays down here at the Caribbean Club, and he sounds like you when he sings. He's got a great voice, just like you. He's got a beard like you, but he's got one of these long ZZ Top things. Complaining is a time waster, says Dave, and people are afraid of changing their lives, so they complain instead. Yes, we'll talk more about the reasons people complain in a couple of days. I'm learning so much, says Mary, because of this program. Thank you, Mary. That's great. I think that's probably one of the reasons you always share. Complaints listened to from others tends to cloud our judgment. Dave, yes, it does. It's draining to be around a complainer. Let me tell you this really quick. You're going to find this amazing. Another study that was done, because I read all these studies, right? Another study that was done was they studied a group of girls in high school who their main thing that drew them together was complaining. They got together and complained. Between classes, they would complain. Complain about the girls in the previous class and the guys in the previous class. Complain about the parents, complain about the weather, complain about anything they wanted to complain about. They complained. And do you know what they complained about? When the girl who was the biggest complainer, they always identified who was the biggest complainer. Do you know who the other girls complained about when she wasn't around? How much she complained. Isn't that amazing? That even in groups that are bonded together through complaining, at some level they recognize and say, I really don't like her. She's so negative. She complains. This is why I go to lunch at 11 a.m. to minimize the chance of complaints said or heard. Dave, good idea. Hey, Corrine, good to see you. I'm grateful for a job and fabulous coworkers. It was my workplace that introduced me to a complaint-free world. I so love that. Churches and businesses. Companies that are super conservative cause complaints because they are not open to positive creative suggestions. They cost more than the conservative company is willing to spend. I will read that and I will not comment, although I feel that conservative is a emotionally charged word for some people. So maybe old and staid or stuck in their ways, something like that. Totally get where you're coming from. I just don't. If somebody said liberal, everybody would freak out. So I'm trying to moderate the world here in my own little corner of it. Heather Ellis says nothing is a better boost to morale than empower employees to make improvements that make their jobs better. William L. Gore, the founder of Gore-Tex, he actually did not allow titles in his company, and he allowed all decisions to be made equally from people down on the floor all the way up to the boardroom. He's an amazing guy. Kathy says she's on day one again. Good for you. You know what? You're doing a heck of a lot better than the people on day 0. And that's most people out there. Hey, says Pamela Jane. Good to see you. Me too, says Mary. Some words have a political charge to it. Sorry about that. No, I get it, Dave. And I know you, buddy, and I know where you're coming from. So we just have to be careful about that. I used to work for GTE. I don't even know if they exist anymore. They're now Verizon. And talk about a company that was slow to change. It was amazing. My boss used to say it was like trying to teach a dinosaur to fetch. You can do it, but it takes a long time and a lot of patience. Ed says complaining keeps the status quo. Yes, it does. We're going to talk about that. I'm really just trying to eliminate negative people from my daily life. Even though I love them, I'm sure you say. GTA has been acquired. Yes, it has. Thanks, everybody. Just remember that complaining, like I said, really does have a negative impact, not only on your life, it has a negative impact on your bottom line. Whether you own a business or like me and everybody else, you do business with a business. Complaining is a drain on you. If you haven't yet, check out complaintfreeworld.org. Get your free complaint-free bracelet and take this challenge with me and everybody else. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
No more complaining people. Their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more complaining people. Their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more.